Silence makes people uncomfortable, not because nothing is happening, but because too much is happening inside their minds. When sound disappears, when responses stop, when nothing comes back, the brain doesn't rest. It searches for meaning, for danger, for reassurance. Most people believe silence is empty. It isn't. Silence is space, and space forces the mind to speak. The brain starts asking questions, unanswered questions, questions with no obvious answers. When someone goes quiet, the brain reads it as a signal, not a logical one, an emotional one. Something has changed. Something is being withheld. Something is unknown. Even if nothing has changed, the brain reacts as if it has. Humans rely on information. When information disappears, panic takes its place. Think about unanswered messages. The phone is silent. No reply. No explanation. The mind doesn't say, "They're busy." It asks questions. Did I say something wrong? Did I offend them? Did I lose value? Not because these thoughts are accurate, because silence gives them room to exist. Silence feels personal, even when it isn't. In social situations, humans rely on feedback to feel safe. Nods, words, expressions, reactions. Feedback equals connection. Silence removes that connection. The brain interprets that as rejection. And rejection activates the same areas of the brain as physical pain. That's why silence feels heavy. Not just emotionally, physically uncomfortable. Most people rush to fill quiet moments. They talk too much. They explain too much. They reveal too much. Noise feels safer than stillness, even if the noise makes things worse. Silence removes control. When someone reacts, you can adjust. When someone argues, you can defend. When someone explains, you can respond. But silence offers no handle, no friction, nothing to push against. Control disappears. And when control disappears, anxiety takes over. That's why silence feels powerful. Not because it dominates, but because it refuses to engage. The brain hates that. Silence forces reflection, and reflection is uncomfortable for people who avoid themselves. When everything is loud, you don't hear your own thoughts, but in silence, there is no escape, only awareness. Unresolved emotions surface. Doubts resurface. Old memories reappear. Silence doesn't create these thoughts, it exposes them. That's why some people fear quiet rooms. Not because of loneliness, but because they don't like who they hear when everything stops. People who are comfortable with silence aren't trying to manipulate anyone. They aren't playing games. They simply don't need constant reassurance. They don't rush to be understood. They don't fight to be validated. They don't fill space out of fear. This alone creates imbalance. In conversations, the person who speaks less often reveals less. The person who speaks more reveals their emotional state. Silence creates pressure. Not intentional pressure, psychological pressure. The other person starts talking, explaining, justifying, correcting themselves. Silence doesn't demand information, it invites it. That's why silence feels threatening. Because it shifts focus inward, it forces introspection, and most people avoid it. People panic around silence when they rely on reaction to measure their worth. They need replies, they need engagement, they need confirmation. Not because they're weak, because they've learned to measure value through attention. Silence removes that measurement. Without measurement, the mind panics. Emotionally strong people don't fear silence. They don't chase closure. They don't beg for clarity. They don't demand explanations. They trust time. They trust space.
This doesn't mean silence is always the answer. It means silence is not the enemy. When you stop reacting immediately, people notice. When you don't over-explain, people think. When you stay calm, others reveal their urgency. Silence exposes imbalance without effort. It changes dynamics without a single word. The person who panics in silence reveals their need for control. The person who remains calm shows self-control. Self-control is rare, and rare things feel powerful. When you become comfortable with silence, you stop chasing reactions. You stop filling gaps. You stop fearing pauses. You speak when it matters. And when you don't speak, your presence still communicates. Silence isn't absence. It's restraint. And restraint unsettles people who live in emotional noise. The calmest person in the room is rarely the loudest. They don't rush. They don't prove. They don't panic. They let silence do what words never could: reveal truth. Once silence no longer scares you, panic loses its grip, because control returns internally. And that is the power of silence.